Hello, everyone. We are going to get started here in just a minute. We're giving folks a few minutes to join. Welcome, welcome. I see a bunch of you just hopped on. I am Liz Prue, VP of Marketing here at Base, and this next session here that we will start in just a few minutes is OKRs from a company's perspective. We are going to have our wonderful guest from our prior session, Olivia Kowalski of GetYourGuide, as well as Tim Whitmire from CXN Advisory. So we'll give everyone just a couple minutes to hop on. Maria on YouTube, I see that you might be able not to hear us. Please let us know if that is still the case, and we'll make sure that everyone can hear us. Okay, welcome, welcome. I just see more people hopped on. Hello, hello. We're going to get started here in just a second. I see Whitney, one of our wonderful community members, is on. Hi, Whitney. Thank you so much for joining today. Awesome. Maria can hear us. Great. Super, super glad. You guys are seeing what you should be seeing. Good, good, good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests, you guys. I am so very excited to welcome back Olivia Kowalski of GetYourGuide. Hello, Olivia. Welcome back.
Hello again, Liz.
Thank you so much for joining us again. We really, really appreciate it. And drum roll, we are welcoming our new featured guest, Tim Whitmire of CXN Advisory. Hello, Tim.
Hey, guys.
Thanks so much for hopping on today. For those of you that don't know Tim, he has talked all things OKRs with us before, but it's been quite a while. So we're very excited to have Tim back today. Tim, would you mind giving just a quick background of your experience for our audience here today?
Sure. I had done a lot of different things in my career. I was a newspaper reporter for many years. I'm the founder of a national network of free workout groups for men. And for the last several years, I've been a consultant, basically a strategic consultant to company leaders, particularly working in the OKR space. I come in and a lot of times help leaders kind of figure out what their strategic objectives are, and then work from the executive level down, really to kind of cascade OKRs through an organization and make sure that alignment and execution are happening the way everybody wants them to. And I'm sure, as you all know, organizations can be complex and difficult, and leaders a lot of times don't know what's going on in all parts of the organization. So our goal is to kind of get everybody on the same page and kind of rowing in the same cadence. So.
Awesome. I love it. And for those of you that weren't able to join our prior session, we'll be talking a lot about what OKRs are, but we're taking a bit of a deeper dive in this session. As a very, very quick overview, OKRs, of course, stand for objectives and key results. And usually when a company follows this process, there are 3 to 5 objectives for a given time period with 3 to 5 key results for each objective tied to that. And specifically today, we're discussing how executive assistants can be crucial in this process, whether it be actually helping assign these key results like Olivia has done at GetYourGuide, or just communicating updates and knowing the right information to provide your executive. But Tim, I would love to start with, I think what I love about your deck so much, and I'm gonna hop to it here, is just talking a little bit about how a company approaches this and what this means. And I love your analogy here of kind of like getting from a plan from A to D and kicking things off with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, this is we're you know, if y'all have kind of done OKRs 101 and kind of have that base level understanding, we're going up to the next level here and really talking about some of the nuances of making OKRs work in an organization. So this would be kind of your 201 level course. We're not gonna get to grad school seminars today for 301, but we're gonna kind of hit some of the high points in 201, and that's really The work that Olivia is doing at Get Your Guide is really kind of where the rubber meets the road. It's really easy for people to sit down and write a list of, oh, here are the things I want to do. And then it's relatively easy usually to come up with here's how I'm going to measure it. Where it gets tough is when you got to put people together and you got complex organizations and different lines of business and people with different agendas and often egos. It can get really complicated. So the first thing I always like to talk about is this issue, Liz, of contingency. And that's simply, we all like to think in sort of kind of a scripted manner that, first, if I do A, that's going to get me to B, and then to C, and then eventually we'll get to D, and that's what our destination is. The reality is that, as they say, life happens, right? Stuff that you think is going to go one way goes sideways, or, the company that you thought, where you had a great relationship and you thought you had the sale all lined up. Well, all of a sudden, the guy who was your main point of contact there, he gets let go, and now you don't have your main point of contact, and there goes the sale, and now we're not going to hit our number for the quarter. So I generally refer to that as contingency. Leaders in any organization, their charge is not to get from A to B to C to D, but figure out how to get from A to D when B goes off track, and now you got to go up to B1 or down to B5 and around and circle around and still get to D. And one of the points I want to make to you guys as an audience, and I think Olivia has lived this, is when things go off the rails, EAs are the ones who are called in to often clean up the mess and help get things back on track. And there's an essential role that EAs play in making helping that navigation stay on track from A to D. So, Olivia, you and I have talked about this previously in our prep for this, but can you kind of give us a sense like where that happens at Get Your Guide and how you're tasked with kind of keeping things on track?
Yes, I can do that. So I think one important thing to mention here is the core strengths of EA is proactiveness and attention to detail. And I think this should enable us to spot contingency early and fast. And what makes this task very difficult is, and we hit on that in a previous session, is business understanding. And my kind of call out to all EAs is to really, really double down on that and really get into business understanding and see how the work of the teams affect company goals and really work on that understanding. And this is a fundamental work you have to do in order to support that process better. And I think this we are in a perfect position with our skill set on communication and on being connected to the entire team in our respective orgs to do that and to see and actually not wait until the end of the quarter to actually escalate something and spot it early and speak up and actually set up a meeting and maybe flag that also to our executives because they cannot keep track of everything all the time. And this is how I think we can support in a great way.
Yeah, so let's dig in on that tracking piece, because I think different people have different understandings of cadence. Obviously, you start out at the beginning of let's say you're doing this on a quarterly basis. You start out at the beginning of the quarter. We're going to start a new quarter on, let's say, July 1st coming up, and you know where you want to get to by the end of the quarter, which in this case would be September 30th. But you got to check in along the way and make sure you're on track, right? And there's that whole process of, are we green for go on this? Are we red, or is the light kind of flashing yellow that there's maybe a warning here? What have you found with your executives is the best way to kind of keep people on track? What's the cadence for checking in with them and kind of seeing where how they're doing?
So we identified for the finance and legal teams that a monthly OKR tracking meeting is the right cadence to choose, and to actually on a bi-weekly basis also keep in our Google Sheets the status of the OKRs. But it's not only about tracking of the OKRs when it comes to the meeting. It's more also for asking for support from other teams if things go sideways, and actually make that prioritization discussion. Does it make sense to put more resources on right now? Can we move things around to make this still work, and have these discussions? all the way. So I think that's how we identified that. And this necessarily doesn't work for everyone. So important point to make here, there's no one size fits all. You have to work with the teams and understand what makes sense. We had that also in the previous session, that a sales team, for instance, maybe more frequently needs to check in on their goals because things are moving so much faster in terms of their kind of specific or typical goals that a sales team has in form of their targets. I think this is also how we can support there pretty well.
Yeah, so let me dive in on that a little bit, because there is a real, to your point about OKRs are not a one size fits all. I'm always kind of jealous of the people in sales, because they've really got it very easy when it comes to OKRs, right? The objective is we want to hit the number for the quarter, we want to grow sales by X%, and the KRs are usually pretty easy. Almost every sales team has a set playbook that it's running. A certain number of, we want to get a certain number of inbound leads, and we want to follow up with them, and we want to convert a certain number to short-term pipeline, long-term pipeline, and then eventually get through that funnel. And everybody's got a funnel, and the numbers are sort of derived from whatever your funnel process is. For other team members and other leaders in an organization, it can be a lot harder to set OKRs. OKRs can feel very, you want me to, let's say I'm a person in marketing, and a lot of my work is very project based. Well, you want me to put a number on that. How do I put a measurement around that? That can be a real challenge for a lot of people. And so your ability as kind of the owner of the OKRs to be flexible around, okay, well, what's the best way to measure your progress toward completion of this project that might not be numerically oriented. You can always come up with a kind of percentage completion estimate, but how many hours a week are you putting in on this? How many meetings are you having with key stakeholders in this process? Are you aligned with the person who's ultimately going to sign off on this? That the ability to kind of come up with the right measurements of success for the different leaders is always really essential, because not everybody can point to really clear, hard numbers. I've worked with a lot of software companies, and you would think that on the engineering side, they would have very clear markers of success and progress on things like coding. It turns out most engineering groups and most coding groups, they can't tell you where they are in a project at any given time. And so you've got to come up with sort of creative measurements for that. Liz, where are we? If you don't mind bringing up the slides, we were going to.
Yeah, on that note, I want to dive a little bit into talking about that alignment and how an assistant really fits themselves into this process, and really calling out too, and we had this up, but I'll toss it up here again, that it's okay if you don't hit these objectives at 100%. And Tim, just here at Base, we've talked to you about this in developing our own OKRs, that it's okay if we don't hit that number, and but it can feel like failure a little bit. So from the assistant's lens, how do they help in your experience? And then we can lean on specific examples from Olivia, but how can an assistant help identify maybe those, I guess, optimizations that may surface, observations, and just to say, hey, we may not be hitting 100% here on this specific objective, but I've noticed from other team members X, X, and X, and what can come out of that.
Yeah, so the way I like to frame this for people is to understand that OKRs are not about daily work, really. And so, an analogy I often use is you can wake up in the morning as a leader in a business, you can pick up your phone and you can look at your inbound email, and you can spend your entire day in your inbox fighting the daily brush fires that come up, right? That this thing's going wrong over here, I got to fix this, or this person's got that problem, or now we got to go hire that person. You spend all your time putting out brush fires. Ultimately, you're never going to do what you're really being paid to do as a leader, which is get the company where it needs to go in the long term. And that's really what OKRs are about. So OKRs are about not looking at the bumper of the car that's right ahead of you in traffic, but looking 100, 200, 300 yards down the road and anticipating what traffic's going to do down the road and maneuvering the car to a different lane to avoid the slowdown in your lane or the knot of traffic in your lane. So it's really about where do I want to be 6 months from now, a year from now, and now you've backed it down to a set of objectives for the next quarter that you believe are going to keep you on track to getting the business to where it needs to be. And those are by nature aspirational, because as we just talked about, things happen, stuff changes, external events change. Everybody on this call lived through 2020, right? Nobody anticipated 2020 at the start of the first quarter of 2020. Nobody anticipated the effect that the pandemic was going to have. So we all had to change. There were a lot of OKRs and a lot of my clients that just got thrown in the wastebasket along about mid-March. And now all of a sudden, okay, how do we reorient? So understanding that your OKRs are your best guess of where you need to be in a quarter, and you know what? If stuff happens, we're going to reorient, and it's going to be okay if we have to junk them completely, or if we don't hit them 100% of where we're going to be. So that's just Olivia. I know you and I talked about this. Tell us a little bit about the Google approach to scoring OKRs and how you guys apply it at GetYourGuide.
So we took Google as well as a role model here, and the guidance that we have is that the sweet spot usually lies in 60 to 7% of achievement of the OKR, and that is considered a success. Why is that? Because OKR should be stretch goals. They should be aspirational, as you said, Tim. And so this is something that we give also as a guideline as well, to really, really set stretch goals and not consider and not 100% achieve KR as a failure. This is really, really important. And EAs are cultural influencers, and we can also influence and help communicate this and put more emphasis on this. This is aspirational. We can ask the right questions. So we can ask, is this KR measurable? When is the timeline for that? And really, really teach people to write better KRs and help with our attention to detail when going through status updates or the KR sheets and see what people are planning to do in the next quarter. And just be part of the drafting and be implemented there. It can be a good way to get started as well. Just give your feedback and valuable input on this, and get familiar maybe as well with the SMART goals model. That could be also something to look into.
And something that we've talked about too that I'd love for you both to dive in on is how this alignment helps identify where teams may need resources that they didn't think they needed initially. And Olivia, you've chatted a little bit about how teams like legal or compliance are those who sometimes oversee because someone may not be aware of something else. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think especially in legal teams or sometimes in other companies, compliance teams, they necessarily not been involved early, or people don't have it on top of their mind that actually this needs extensive legal resources. And there it is important to instruct the staff to actually look through other departments' plans and really spot where they might have been overseen and missed, and actually contact those people. And everyone has a high sense of responsibility, and driving that culture is also something that we were trying to do by actually maybe even have you seen what the product team is planning there? I think they need legal resources. Can you take a look? Or this kind of situations. I mean, they do it by themselves, of course, but we can always be a second pair of eyes and support here.
So I'll just jump in here. When there was OKRs really kind of became popular a few years ago when a guy named John Doerr wrote a book called Measure What Matters, and that's where most executives get their introduction to OKRs. And there are probably about 100,000 executives around the world who have read that book and then gone back in and told somebody, hey, let's do these OKRs. These sound really good from the book. And The thing that John Doerr doesn't really get into in the book that I noticed when I read it the first time, and I've made part of my OKRs practice, is he doesn't talk a lot about dependency in OKRs. I think there's a tendency in a lot of organizations to be very siloed. You've got different lines of business. You've got sales, you got marketing, you got engineering, you got product development, and they don't tend to talk to each other really well. You would think they would, but particularly as an organization grows and a CEO is trying to do a million different things and be the face of the company, it becomes very hard to ensure that all these different parts of the organization are talking to one another. And the real value that I see in OKRs is it forces the leaders of each of these siloed organizations to sit down and have a conversation before the start of each quarter. And this is how I run it in my practice. Tell everybody what your objectives for the quarter are, and then also look around the room and say, hey, Joe in marketing, or hey, Nina in engineering, I need your support to be able to accomplish this thing. I'm dependent on you to be able to get where I need to go this quarter. I'm going to take ownership of this objective, and my team is going to take ownership of it, but I can't do it without your team's support. And that piece of it, that conversation, to me is the most valuable thing, because, and Olivia, you may have some examples of where you've seen this happen. You've already cited kind of that legal and compliance piece. So often people are driving down a certain road. Oh, we're going to do this with the product. Well, have you checked that with legal yet? You know, would that keep us in compliance with all the European Union guidelines about privacy and so forth? That kind of consultation and that recognition of dependency, if you can get people in those conversations on a quarterly basis, and before I go charging down the road in pursuit of this objective, and you can support me with the resources that you have, that makes it that much more likely that we're going to be able to.
And one thing maybe here to add, Tim, is
dependency recognition is just huge.
Oops, sorry, I think there was a bit of a lag time, Tim. Okay. Okay, Olivia, I think you're good to go.
Okay, maybe I jump in here. I wanted to add that one thing that GetYourGuide is doing in order to kind of solve that issue that you spotted very well, Tim, is that we already in the drafting stage for the next quarter, we include cross-team dependencies already in our drafting sheets. So we have to instruct people to put in teams that could potentially be affected, and then foster these kind of conversations and alignment, and and take it early on in the drafting stage, in the planning process for the next quarter, to avoid actually that in the middle of the quarter we have to think about resources again.
Absolutely, getting that that advanced sign off from your colleagues on, yes, I've got the resources to support you in this thing is just is absolutely critical. And that's, you know, this takes us off in another direction, but a lot of times when people go shopping for OKR software solutions, a lot of the software solutions don't necessarily include capacity to track those kind of dependencies. And to me, that's always sort of a first question that I ask is, can you link up and reflect the dependencies that different people have in their OKRs? So it's awesome. I love, as I said to you earlier, I love that you guys came to that same conclusion that I did. So I feel validated by it.
Okay. I'd love to dive a little bit into scoring, and we talked briefly about this in Olivia's session, but what I'd love your insight on, Tim, is how I love how you say at their best, OKRs allow growth stage organizations, because they face so many array of choices for direction and action, to really help filter and prioritize potential paths of action, and why that's so important for an assistant to understand, so that way they can get their head in that mindset as well. If we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so look, I mean, what you know, as an assistant, you know, and this is where you're sort of future-proofing your role, and I know we talk about this a lot, but your ability to understand kind of the top-level strategic objectives of the company is essential. And then executives get pulled in a million different directions, and there's, what we call shiny object syndrome, the tendency, an opportunity walks in the door and it's new and shiny and it doesn't have all the complications of all these things that have been bogging you down for the last 3 weeks. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go chase after that. This would be great, and your ability to kind of step in there and be the trusted advisor who says, but wait, this would take us off in this whole direction. We said at the beginning of the quarter that we were going to chase these 4 things and prioritize them above everything. If this 5th thing is so important, then great, maybe we need to reorient, but let's think about what we're going to take off our plates and not chase because we're going to go chase this new 5th thing. And ultimately, the best OKR systems at the very top are following, kind of company level strategic objectives that have been set and have been, the objectives for this quarter should be leading you down the path toward whatever your company's objectives are for the next 1 to 3 years of growth, particularly at the growth stage. You probably can't go much further than that, but you've generally got an idea where you want to be in 1 to 3 years. And the quarterly objectives are designed to lead you down that path. And now, something comes in that's new and shiny and let's go chase after that. Well, does it align to ultimately what we're trying to do over the longer term? And so your ability to understand that and then be that trusted advisor who comes in and says, no, we're not going in that direction. Or usually you're not in a position to say, no, we're not, but do we really want to go in that direction? Because we've already had the conversation and I thought we were going in this direction. So particularly at the growth stage, most businesses are really resource strapped, as Olivia referred to. I mean, you guys have so much stuff going on. You're trying to scale rapidly. You're trying to bring new people on, help them understand the business and the culture. To make that pivot kind of midstream, there are significant opportunity costs involved in that.
I'm muted. There we go. And I think at that point too, it helps. And Olivia, we chatted about this as well. That's why it's so important to understand who owns the key result. So it's not ultimately just you, the assistant, saying, okay, I have to decide what's most important. You function as a team. This is supposed to be, it requires teamwork. And I know we have something for context here too to help. But when I love how you said, Olivia, that you work with the other assistants in other departments to make sure you're all in alignment and everyone understands. So that way it's not like you're saying, I'm prioritizing this because of blah, blah, blah. No one has any context or any understanding as to why that specific initiative or campaign or whatever is being prioritized. Okay, I'd love to talk a little bit about ownership. So I think, and that's something that I've seen a lot in the comments too, in the last couple sections, folks are saying, well, am I responsible for these OKRs? Am I responsible for my executive success with this? How exactly can I take all of this information that I've learned and applied it to what I, the assistant, am ultimately responsible for? So Tim, would you walk us through a little bit how OKRs, who really owns those, and specifically how an assistant helps with that? So that way we make that super clear.
Yeah, and I have strong opinions in this area that often don't align with what some other people think. So look, the biggest problem I see with OKRs are when they're owned by either operations, which is or by HR. Those are the two biggest, and frequently they do get handed to one of those two organizations. So if they're handed to HR, they tend to get used as a performance management tool. And my personal feeling about that is OKRs are not a performance management tool. And that goes to what Olivia was saying earlier about getting people comfortable with failure around OKRs. We have it's maybe not such an issue in the German educational system, but we have something called grade inflation here in the States, where everybody's used to getting an A or worse to B plus, and anything lower than that, most executives would consider that failure. And so you start telling people, 60 or 70%, that's success, and they have a very hard time kind of wrapping their heads around that. And so that if OKRs become this thing where you're being graded on them, and ultimately your ability to hit them 100% determines what your compensation at the end of the year is, then people sandbag, and we all see that every day. Oh, I have to have a certain number of client meetings this year to hit my bonus. I'll be sure to set that to a level that I'm very confident I can reach. And that's not what OKRs are about. OKRs are about stretching yourself and the organization. So I don't think they tend to work well when they're used as a performance management tool. I also don't think they work well when they're used for day-to-day and weekly operations. So you think about kind of KPIs, key performance indicators. Those are the kind of things that operations is tracking on a daily or even weekly basis to make sure that the business is running smoothly. When you give operations control over OKRs, they're going to want to plan every single aspect of them and know that the operations people tend to be very linear, that kind of direct A to B to C to D thing. So ultimately, if your EAs are in the general administrative category, those are actually the people who I often think are best suited to own OKRs. So it may not be that a given EA owns OKRs for the entire company, but somebody in a chief of staff role at the top of that GA function is really well positioned, because you're not in the daily operations of the business, you're not in HR, but you've got that kind of global view of the business, and you have touch points across the business, and you're able to kind of hopefully mediate between the different groups involved. And so your role, I frankly think as an EA is indispensable, particularly if you're able to coordinate with other EAs who are assigned to other executives across the company and kind of maintain that global perspective where you're keeping people focused on ultimately the aspirational aspects of OKRs. Olivia, any thoughts on that and how you see that play out at GetYourGuide?
So one thought that I had is how company values also play into that, and having an OKR. So company values have to kind of align with having an OKR system as well. And one of the GetYourGuide's company values is learning. And learning you can only do when you get out of your comfort zone. And it's aspirational, it's a stretch goal. And this is exactly how this all ties together. And we as EAs, we are fundamental influencers of the company culture, and we can drive learning more and showcase the importance of learning and really live this value and communicate also accordingly to help the teams don't see OKR as a performance measurement tool, because it's clearly a guideline that it isn't at GetYourGuide, but still sometimes people think or forget that it's actually not about performance. More important is the impact of the key result that you're bringing to the business, and not if you achieved the result or not. So that's one important thing to differentiate between.
Yeah, and I'll pile onto that even more, which is that to me, the best results of OKRs come from, we talked about kind of that quarterly meeting that happens before the start of the quarter, where everybody gets their OKRs out and they kind of argue about them and, oh, why are you going in this direction? And how can you support me in that? That is, to me, one of the most valuable, regardless of the scoring or the failure or the success, is getting people in a room, making them talk to each other and getting them aligned. And what I always tell my executive teams is, I want you to come into this room and I want you to fight about the OKRs, and I want you to argue passionately that, your OKR should be prioritized over their OKR, or you should get the resources. But at the end of it, we're going to come out to agreement, and I want you to come out of this room locked arms, kind of like a team, and we're all getting this together and we're all fighting to get the same thing. So the dominant analogy that I use in my consulting practice is of a crew team, of a rowing team. So you think about the 8 rowers in a boat, one after the other. They've all got to row in the same cadence to make the boat go effectively through the water. They can't have one person up about to put their oar in the water and the other one just finishing their stroke. If that happens, the boat tips back and forth and it doesn't move through the water. My goal with OKRs is always to get all 8 of the people, or however many people on the executive team, rowing in the same cadence, moving at the same pace, putting their oars in the water and pulling together. My job is to be the little guy, the little coxswain sitting in the front of the boat, who's kind of the coach in the boat. And think of yourself as the EA in that role. You're kind of coaching your people. You don't have to pull on the oars. You've got your own set of work to do, but you're really trying to get them all in alignment and rowing together. And that's the most valuable piece of this, is if everybody's on the same page, understands the goals that they're that they're working toward together, and is in agreement about the way to get there. That's invaluable for any organization.
And it really keeps, we talk a lot on our weekly based lives with our guests. They share a lot about how they've used inserting themselves into or becoming a part of OKR, or just your basic goal setting process, whatever your organization calls it. It helps you become a part of that team and not just supporting the executives you support. It not just, like you said, make sure the executives are all on the same page, but those that support the executives. And we say here at BASE a lot that we look at the assistant role as, they are that lever that really helps steer the executive in the right direction. They are their right-hand person. And I think that this being aware of what they're measured on at the highest level, it really makes your role indispensable, because these are really the things most important to the executive in the business. So it's crucial to make sure you have that understanding.
And I think, Olivia, it sounds like you kind of hit this during your session, but the ability of the assistant to understand kind of how the business operates, and basically what the underlying economic model of the business is. If you work for a SaaS company, how are we navigating that, threading the needle of a SaaS business to get from being a price taker in the market to a price maker? What are the expectations of the company? How many venture rounds have you taken? What are the long-term goals? The more you can develop an understanding of that, you don't have to be as good at it as the executives are. Lord knows I don't know as much. I get to sit here and advise executives about things, construction and utility management consulting, that I don't know a thing about, but you're able to bring to them an ability to see the bigger picture and to get aligned across different parts of the organization. That's invaluable. I talk to a lot of different executives, and I'll ask them, is everybody in your organization on the same page? And they're like, oh yeah, everybody gets along completely. We're totally. I have yet to see an organization where everybody is in complete and perfect alignment. And so if you've got kind of the key, that understanding of getting people on the same page, that is the best kind of future proofing you can do for your role.
100% agree.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to give everyone time to ask some questions. I know we've thrown a lot at everyone today, and some of this may be new to you, or some of this you may have had a basic understanding. But regardless, we'd love to have you drop your questions in the chat so we can have Tim and Olivia answer any of those. Again, there's a little bit of a lag on Facebook, so I'll give you all just a couple minutes. But Olivia, was there anything, and I'm kind of reviewing our notes here, we really walked through all of the different use cases that we wanted to touch, because when I think we were actually, Tim, streaming a recording of your session last fall that Olivia was watching and participated in the chat, and I was like, can I please talk to you? This would be so great. Because you've had such a unique embedded experience in this process. And so I'm so glad we were able to connect you both. But was there anything else?
Olivia, I'm curious. How long have you been at GetYourGuide again?
I joined last year, in May 2020.
Okay. So as you came in, how were they in the process of, I assume they had to pivot their model substantially because of the pandemic, and, probably hard to match people with guides when nobody's traveling and so forth. What did you see about how the company adjusted its objectives and sort of pivoted to deal with the pandemic?
So I think we focused mainly on getting us ready for the recovery, because for us it was clear at some point, we don't know yet when, this is going to be over and travel will come back. and it will come back stronger. That's what we've seen in crisis in general. When you look back at other crises in history, certainly these industries that are hit, they're coming back stronger, and travel is one of them. So we were actually preparing us for the recovery and see how we can actually be ready at this point. And of course, make sure our business is still up and running and efficient. And yeah, so of course, it was a very, very challenging time. And for me personally, I remember that this whole remote setting, a lot of things needed to be changed, new meeting formats, and that was kind of a challenging time. And we still continue to do a OKR process every quarter. That wasn't even a question, and maybe even more. And it was, we could even work on more aspirational things because there wasn't much business. And so we could actually be prepared to even scale faster and have the fundamentals and the foundation for becoming successful after once the recovery starts. And we're now in the middle of the recovery, so that's really, really great to see, and especially in the US. So I see you guys open up way earlier than Europe, and so that's kind of a interesting market for us as well.
Yeah, having been on planes a couple times in the past few weeks for various travel things, it's back to full capacity everywhere. It's been really impressive. And to your, like, what the pandemic offered for a company like you guys was, you were gonna, as a fast growing company, you had to keep the car on the racetrack the whole time and try to fix the car while it's driving. The pandemic became an opportunity to maybe take the car off the track, put it, on pit road, and do some work on it without having to drive it at full speed all the way through the pandemic. And that was a huge opportunity for y'all. So I'm looking at a question from Lakeisha about developing your business intelligence seems to be the key. Yep, there we go. What are the first steps for a rapidly growing company? I really, Olivia, want to hear your thoughts on this. To me, whenever you're onboarding somebody new, it's the executive's job to really pour themselves and their knowledge into, whether it's an EA or a new, head of business development or whatever. I was literally with a client this morning who's onboarding a new head of business development. And I said, one of your objectives for the next quarter is to spend a lot of time with this guy. You've got to teach him everything you know about the business and the culture. And so as an assistant, it's really, your executive may not be trained that well, and it's kind of your job to put your hand up and say, I really need you to sit me down and explain to me how this business works. If it takes getting out the whiteboard, I'm willing to sit here and listen, and I'll ask as many questions as I need to get there. But it's really, you need to gain as deep an understanding as you can from the inside of how the business works, and what the executive's top priorities are and where they see the business going. So I don't ever hesitate to put your hand up and ask for that. And quite honestly, a leader who's not willing to invest that kind of time in their people, that may be ultimately a bad fit. If it's just sort of, I'm going to throw you in the deep end of the pool and let you sink or swim, that may be itself a sign of issues. So, but I'll let Olivia talk about it as well.
So one thing that also prepared me, besides like having that strong support from the chief of staff, was as well that we actually, like, OKRs are so fundamental in our culture. So every new joiner kind of sooner or later hears about it. And we offer trainings and sessions and decks and also materials for employees when they join. And the expectation is that everyone gets familiar with this framework. So that's also part of the onboarding itself. And that already helps the teams to do that. But also to gain that kind of business understanding, I think Business Financials 101 is something everyone can do. Ask your executive what are the top 3 KPIs for your company and what is your next goals, and ask those questions. And then over the time, this understanding will come. It's just not a checklist. Okay, today I'm learning business understanding, and you learn it. It's a continuously effort. And asking the right question is one of the advices that I could give, and make yourself familiar with the main business model of the company as well, and see how that works and how they gonna get revenue, and understand this as a fundamental base for your understanding, and just keep going.
A great comment from a Facebook user that just popped up, Liz. Maybe you can share that one.
Yeah. Oh, this one?
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go. That's all you need to do. We didn't need to do any of this today. That's it.
Yeah. Don't forward them to anybody outside the organization, but you've got that ability. And look, one of the things I'll say is sometimes intimidating, and I've done this many times in my career. I learned it very early on as a newspaper reporter, because you never know, you might get sent to court one day, you might get sent up to the legislature another day. You have to learn the jargon of your business. There's always insider language in any business. I've probably used a number of acronyms today myself. I talked about SaaS, which stands for Software as a Service, which is a particular model of a lot of high-flying tech businesses. But learning that lingo and learning that jargon and being able to get comfortable using it with other people serves as a really useful signal that, oh, I'm an insider and I kind of get things too. And at the same time, you're also like, well, I'm new, so I'm going to ask you a stupid question, and that's okay because I'm new, and there's no embarrassment in that. But that, I think a substantial part of being an EA is just, you got to be a lifelong learner, right? You never know what kind of situation you're going to get thrown in, and you got to be able to develop that expertise across the company. So don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions, and don't be afraid to learn to talk like an insider.
We actually, for those of you that weren't in the first session with Olivia, Tim, you'll love this. Olivia has added a context column to help identify, like, what is the jargon of your department, because that's something, a lot of people don't think about. And then, like what we were talking, further context on why you're doing certain things. But it's a really good tip. I love that.
Oh, yeah. No, and I mean, that's the thing. Even within a company, the marketing people talk differently than the sales people, talk differently than the engineering people. Yeah. They all have they're all like little tribes. And this is again why the alignment becomes so important, because the tribe runs off in its own direction, and you got to kind of herd them together and keep them on the same path.
And I know this might be jumping backwards a little bit, but I wanted to let everyone know too, what the resources that we'll be sending out. Someone on Facebook had asked if we could provide an example of a high-level OKR and break it down. And we actually have a blog post that I'm going to share with all you registrants that is also going to have consolidated tips from both Olivia and Tim's session. And Tim, this is probably a very, very basic one, but didn't know if you had any other just additional context that before we wrap up here today for anyone, as far as really the difference between objectives and key results, so everyone has that true understanding as they leave here today.
Yeah, I actually literally before I came on here, I was in a session with one of my clients this morning doing objectives for the second half of the year. So look, the objective is top line, kind of where you want to get, and it's usually not number driven, it's more descriptive. But it's within, it's time bound. So, for this company, and this is a construction company, they want to lay the groundwork for full implementation and strong growth in 2022. So that's one of the objectives for the second half of this year. Like I said, they're onboarding a new business development director. And so they want to make sure that they don't expect him to start generating a huge amount of new business immediately, because that would be unrealistic. He's new in the role. But the objective is to really lay the groundwork for strong growth in 2022. And so that's sort of your top level headline there. And then below that, what are the things we can measure that over the course of this 6 months will tell us that we're on track? And like I said, the contingency, I don't want to get into he has to land 3 new deals by the end of the year, because who knows what happens? Who knows if we're able to hit that number or not? But we wind it back and we get down to base level things that we know he's going to have pretty good control over. So we said We want him to set up over the course of those 6 months, 50 kind of first round meetings with different clients. And they may be people we already know, or they may be completely new people. But that's an average of 2 meetings a week with potential clients. So that was one of them. Another one was let's convert those into 10 different times where we're submitting pricing and a set of plans for a private contract to build a building for somebody. So 50 first round meetings, and we're gonna have 10 submissions of price and specs. Again, we're not going to say how that's going to turn out because we don't know. There's a lot of contingency involved in that. But that if we can do that 10 times over the second half of the year, we'll feel like we're in pretty good shape. And then the third piece, and this is more project based, but we want to deploy a CRM for the first time at this company. And we want the business development owner to be the owner and most active user of that CRM system so that we're now tracking our contacts and we're now tracking potential deals and running a weekly pipeline and being very organized about that. And that was one where we talked about that guy who's going to be in that role is dependent on 2 other people at the company, one of them being the head of HR, the other being the head of finance, to make deployment of the CRM successful. So again, neither of them is going to own the CRM key result, but they're going to be key dependencies in realizing this objective. So that's and you guys have good examples on the base website. Anybody who wants to hit me up by email, I'm happy to work through anything with them and answer any further questions as well. But hopefully that gives you a sense of what we're talking about.
And if you wouldn't mind, Tim, just sharing briefly, so having that context then for an assistant, how does that, just if you have, I don't know if off the top of your head, a use case you can think of to say, okay, now that there needs to be 50 of these meetings scheduled, you have that context as you're, checking in or managing time, for example.
Right. So if I'm the assistant to if I'm the assistant and I'm supporting this new BD guy, well, one of the ways I can help him with that, if I know that that's one of his key results, is, hey, let's print out the company's full contact list. Hey, here's who we already know and who I've contact with in the past. Now, I just said they're not running a CRM yet, so that may look like an Excel spreadsheet or somebody's Rolodex file, but that gives him a starting point for, okay, here's who all our existing clients are. So you can reach out to some of them for meetings. Hey, I want to come by, introduce myself. I'm the new head of BD at this company. But it also lets him know, here's who we haven't had contact with. And he can start looking at where his contacts are. So that would be a key support to that. I have yet to work at a company that ran a CRM where the EAs were not involved in inputting a lot of data into the CRM. And so, your ability to support the business development director and help him figure out how to get meeting notes into the CRM efficiently. Can he dictate notes after a meeting and send you a voice memo and then you can type them in, or does the CRM have that kind of functionality? Those are huge support roles. And then once you're managing his calendar, checking in with him. Hey, have you had those 2 meetings this week? Hey, looks like the next couple of weeks are kind of light with meetings. Are there people I can reach out to that you'd like me to help set stuff up? Again, playing that kind of critical support role and keeping people on track.
That's great. I think we have time for one more question, and this is from a user on Facebook. Would you recommend OKR meetings conducted one-on-one privately or publicly with the whole team, or perhaps it depends on the team? If you weren't in our first session, we touch on how Olivia specifically does that at GetYourGuide, but Tim, do you have any thoughts you'd like to put
I think it's very similar to what Olivia does. I think kind of that if you're doing a weekly or bi-weekly check-in, that can be a one-on-one thing, but you really need the whole leadership team around the table at least once a month to kind of do that check-in and see where everybody is. Because again, theoretically, they've all made commitments before the start of the quarter or before the start of the tracking period that they're going to support each other. When things start to go off track, I want them in that room together or on that Zoom together, talking about how we're going to fix this and how we're going to get things back on track. So that's where the a lot of times I think we're all familiar with kind of negative accountability, and that was sort of what I was getting at when I was talking about using OKRs as performance management. We're all that negative accountability cycle of like, boy, if I don't hit this number, I'm not going to get paid my bonus, or I might get let go if I'm not performing in this way. The whole point to me of OKRs, what makes them really strong, is it creates a cycle of positive accountability. We're all in this together as a team. We're all responsible for realizing these objectives together, and we're going to hold each other accountable, but across the team in a positive manner. And that was what, when I was forming my business, took me back to my days of rowing crew in college, because you're all in the boat together. And like, even if you think the guy in front of you is not hitting it hard enough, you've got to find a way to reach him and help make him better. Without, you can't throw him out of the boat. You got to do it together, and you got to get in sync somehow. I view it as a very positive form of accountability, and it's really important to be able to do it with the whole team at least once a month.
Yep.
And it's also an opportunity to showcase highlights in the other teams and give people exposure to speak about their work, to let this challenge, to have an additional platform for receiving feedback. I think this is also quite important, and a big thing on company culture, to have this sort of exchange and alignment, and people asking questions on how exactly does that work, and to create some sort of curiosity and interest, and on the long term to create this kind of framework where teams are cross-collaborating, because it's so much more effective in the end.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that as well. I mean, we've had a lot of conversation, a lot of focus on, okay, well, what happens if people are missing their OKRs, or what happens if, is it okay to fail? The flip side of that is the celebration of successes. A lot of times we sort of put things out there and oh, well, we did it. We did what we said we would do. No, I mean, you gotta celebrate when people achieve these things, and you gotta sort of pass the champagne around, or drink a beer, or whatever it is that makes that work. But that celebration of team achievement is also critical, because you start hitting some of these things, and if you've really done the proper job of being aspirational about them, that's awesome. I mean, you're positioning your company to and everybody to do well all the way into the future. You're basically laying the groundwork for your continued growth within the business. So remembering to celebrate that stuff is critical.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. I cannot thank you both enough, especially with the last minute scheduling, but in working with EAs, of course, Olivia, you made it completely seamless and wonderful. So we really appreciate it. And Tim, of course, thank you for bumping your time today. I think it ended up actually working out perfect, because these sessions layered off each other. So I hope all of you watching enjoyed that as well. At 1 p.m., so in 30 minutes, 1 p.m. Eastern, we are going to be doing a demo with Base Customer Success Manager Mallory Greer. She has helped create 3 different templates that can help you, however your process is, whether it's a formal OKR process at your organization, or just a very general like goals 101 process between you and the leaders you support. 3 different templates: 1 tracking goal by quarter, tracking goal by goal, and then also tracking your own goals as an executive assistant. So please join us at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then here in just a couple minutes, because we love to keep things fun here, we are going to be doing giveaways. So if you have not checked out our Base shop yet, and I'll show you guys that here quickly. Tim, Olivia, I'm not even sure if you guys have seen this yet. This is our Base swag shop. We have lots and lots of fun stuff. I think the wine tumbler is actually the most ordered thing because of course. So we're going to be giving away some swag from this. We support a nonprofit organization each month. The last couple months have been Youth Guidance. This month we are donating a portion of proceeds to stopaapihate.org. And you can find all sorts of different information on here. If you are joining right now, and for some reason you can't join during our break at 12:30, I will give you a little teaser as to how you can enter. It's super easy. enter the giveaway by signing up for BASE. It's completely free. We have a free version. You can do so at app.basehq.com. If you're already signed up for BASE, don't worry. We did not forget about you. You're automatically entered to win. So if you're registered for the summit here and you sign up for BASE, you're entered to win some swag from our awesome swag shop. But we'll be giving away more of that here in just a few minutes. But again, I wanted to thank you both so much for joining, and we will be sending out the decks that we used today and tips from both of these sessions following, so that way you have all that information. Yeah, thanks again. We appreciate it.
And Liz, just so folks know, I'm happy to spend an hour with anyone on the phone talking through OKRs or answering questions. So if you want to throw my email address into the chat, I can't figure out how to put it in there myself, unfortunately, but if you want to throw that in there and anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to spend the time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tim. And we're creating a dedicated hub for you guys that we're going to send out at the end of the summit. So I'll be sure to include it there, so you guys all have it.
Olivia, thank you so much. Really appreciate you working overtime on this.
I know. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure of joining you today, and I really much enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in a few minutes for more giveaways and at 1 p.m. with Matt.